So after a rocket's week that saw the Dow pierce 20,000, we finished with a whimper, but this is just reloading time. And I think next week we're going to see big-time earnings releases along with that jobs report. So be ready to rock and roll. This week, of course, tariff was the word that was tossed around a lot, and much to the chagrin of business leaders and many Republicans. But, you know, it wasn't always considered to be a bad thing. In fact, it was part of Republican orthodoxy. The use of tariffs was once the central plank of the party's economic policies. Abraham Lincoln was known to favor tariffs to protect the economy and to generate revenue, but it was the landslide victory of William McKinley who gained popularity for championing the use of tariffs. He won in a landslide election in 1897. He signed the Dingley Tariff Act. That imposed tariffs on wool and hides, also increased existing tariffs on linen, silks, China, even doubled the tariff on sugar. America then began an impressive economic rebound. Remember, we were coming out of the panic of 1893. Business investment surged, and ultimately it resulted in McKinley winning re-election by an even larger margin. Now, on a side note, McKinley was considered the first president to also manage the media, so keep that in mind. And then there's Warren Harding and Calvin Coolidge combination. They championed trade protectionism as a way to pull the country out of a depression. The Fort Macomber tariff of 1921, it allowed the president latitude to hike tariffs, in fact, as high as 50%. For those that they railed against the idea that it was inexpensive imports that we needed, well, President Coolidge actually borrowed a McKinley line saying, cheap goods means cheap men. Of course, the roaring 20s ushered in an economic boom. It was, in fact, the best decade ever for the stock market. So what changed for the Republican Party from proud protectionists to free market disciples? Well, it was a reaction to economic turmoil that accompanied the stock market crash in 1929. President Herbert Hoover signed Smoot-Hawley into effect. Listen, it was the second highest tariff in history, and it covered 20,000 imported items. Soon it triggered counter tariffs from key trading partners, trading wars. Many economists think it was actually that act that turned the aftermath of what should have been a dip from a stock market crash into the Great Depression. So FDR beat Hoover, and Republicans moved away from the idea of tariffs as an economic weapon or even a revenue generator, well, because it was no longer a slam dunk for them. I want to bring in now Ed Pozzouli and Adam Goodman, two historians themselves. And, you know, it's fascinating, Ed, that tariffs were a centerpiece for Republicans in the past, and they worked.
Yeah, they not only worked, but, you know, tariffs go way back. Actually, Alexander Hamilton was the first who said was very much in favor of tariffs to lift American industry out of the Revolutionary War and the debt there. So it goes way back. But there's a more important issue here, Charles. Donald Trump ran on this, and he is actually doing what he said he was going to do. And so some of these things, why are we surprised by this? This is part and parcel to trying to create a fair trade policy, and those who are unfair to us might feel the wrath of a tariff.
But by the same token, though, Adam, you do have a lot of Republicans, high-ranking members on Capitol Hill. There's a lot of influential Republican business leaders who are just dead adamantly against the idea of tariffs, particularly something that can launch a trade war.
Well, since we're all being history professors tonight, let me offer this. Henry George was a noted economist from the 19th century who was really against protectionism, and he warned that tariffs were essentially declarations of war. And yet, in the same work, he also said that good and fair trade is the extinguisher of war. Meaning you really make things, if you really play by the rules, if you really have a level playing field, everybody wins, everyone benefits, things can work. So I think there's been a lot of hysteria about the word tariff, which, of course, Ronald Reagan imposed a tariff on Japanese automobiles. President Obama imposed a tariff on Chinese tires. This is not new, but what is new, and this really goes into what we just heard from the other guests, which is it's a different attitude. There's a different attitude in town that says we mean it, but we mean it in terms of we want everyone to win. But right now we've seen a trail of 8 years where America has not been winning, not just in terms of lost jobs, but on the trading field. And I think the president has said we've had enough. All
right, gentlemen, it's good to share information with two noted historians. You guys have a great weekend. I appreciate it.